oh, blah, 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 boring politics,
etc., etc.,
etc., etc., lizards and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They rang us up and they said this.
Dun, 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 dun.
So, are we going to do a headlines? Are there any headlines?
Well, there's been loads going on since our last video, because obviously we've had the Labour
And the
conference
Tory.
and the Tory conference. All very interesting. We've done Piggate, so we got up to there.
Well, the lying about Jeremy Corbyn has reached such ridiculous levels of just nonsense.
Yeah.
Where they just pretend he said something different. It's got to the point where it doesn't matter what he says, because the media will just report something different. Anything. They can just pretend he didn't say that and just pretend he said something else. Unless you hear what he says face to face, or you can actually go on the internet and watch it.
I wonder if they're doing it a little bit too much. There's going to be a point where it reaches saturation where people are just going to go, just start ignoring it.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean,
if they keep pumping out this message that he's a Britain-hating, terrorist-loving, IRA sympathising monster, and then he comes on the TV and says something really reasonable and seems quite nice, quite a decent chap.
Yeah.
I think people are just going to
surely
just tune it out.
Surely people can think for themselves. Surely.
Well, I think the last general election proved that that's probably not the case.
The last general election was different because there wasn't a lot of choice. We had New Labour, who was still New Labour and much the same as the Tories, or you had the real Tories, who would be...
Yeah, I don't think that was actually true. I think that was a lot of... I think there was a perception out there, but I genuinely still feel that Ed Miliband was a genuine alternative, and that he was set on changing the balance of power in this country, because it is too weighted towards a certain demographic, i.e. people with lots and lots of money who donate to the Conservative Party. And I think he would have done that. I mean, he stood up to Rupert Murdoch, which was an incredibly foolish thing to do.
Yeah, that's why he didn't win in the end, isn't it?
For a politician.
Yeah.
He changed the debate on energy when he said he was going to put a cap on energy prices, which put the Conservatives completely on the back foot. Had a massive influence on the conflict in Syria, which, despite all the Conservative protestations now saying how disastrous that was, well, it was obviously right, because now we're going to bomb the people that were fighting Assad, who we were going to bomb. So essentially we would have been propping up ISIS. Yeah. So
but that was okay then. It's different now. I don't remember that, so that doesn't count.
The Tories still refuse to square that circle, explain to us why it was such a terrible thing that
we didn't
do
help
it.
ISIS.
Parliament for once did the right thing. So I think there was a genuine difference, but I don't think it had time to actually sink in and penetrate.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that the nonsense, Red nonsense was complete nonsense. He was incredibly moderate, really. You could argue actually he was very, very centrist.
Oh, he was very... I mean, you see John McTernan, this stranger, no one's ever heard of before, suddenly going on to TV criticising Jeremy Corbyn. All of a sudden he's on Daily Politics, he's on Newsnight, simply because it's interesting to see a Labour politician stick the knife in to the leadership, saying, well, we know these policies don't work because they didn't work in the last general election. Well, actually, what's happened since the last general election is the Conservative trying to adopt the policies that Labour came up with pretty wholesale, really. I mean, the living wage and... Politics has eaten itself,
literally, hasn't it? In that the New Labour was supposed to be Tories light, and then the Tories couldn't get into power, so they became New Labour. Yeah. So it's all eaten itself, and it's all gone round in a circle. And there's still no evidence that it works, because it looks like it doesn't work.
Wow.
So
I find it peculiar that one of the biggest announcements in the Conservative Parliament was this building of 200,000 houses. They're going to change planning laws.
Yeah, affordable housing.
Well, which is ridiculous, because they changed planning laws in the last Parliament. What they're saying is that didn't work, so we're going to do it again.
Yeah,
that didn't work this time.
That awful previous government.
Yeah.
Oh, well, obviously, Theresa May. Obviously, she was lying, made up loads of stuff, but her idea that, that government, what they were doing, it was her. What is she talking about? It's just bullshitting on such a level. And the media complied overwhelmingly. But it like it used to be. You know, we have the internet now, and where everyone just makes fun of you if you do stuff like that.
Yeah.
The question is whether that's enough. I mean, the proportion of people in the country who are governed by TV and newspapers, the proportion of those people, how open they are on the internet. Are they just on Facebook with the people who they like, or not, is the question. And how broad is that? Because obviously the Twitterati have become a thing and have become unpopular with certain members of the establishment, obviously.
Yeah. I find that although debate on Twitter it's a bit like a comment section on YouTube, it can be pretty rubbish. But there is the Twitterati tend to be quite informed. They actually have an interest in politics.
Yeah, but
it's not necessarily a good gauge of what's going on in the country. I would guess Gogglebox is probably a more interesting gauge of what's happening in the country. Because there's people out there, they just sit there and they watch TV.
Yeah, but
it surprises me that how many people they just let things go in.
Yeah, but they're not real. I mean, it's they're being filmed. They know they're being filmed, so it's not actually secretly filming people. So
Maybe
it's still reality TV, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think Twitter. Obviously, Twitter is ridiculous, and you can make fun of it and everything. But it is the biggest democratic voice in history, isn't it? And although it is much like YouTube comments, and it's just awful. That's what people are like. I'm afraid. Sorry. That opinion there is more meaningful than anything else, I think.
Yeah, but there is also the element of with all this social media, you got it's got confirmation bias built in, so you only subscribe
To people you like.
to people who echo what you think.
Well, you'd think, but what it seems people are doing, they're subscribing to people they disagree with and making fun of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But that's meaningful as well. So it's soon, obviously, if David Cameron did his big lie, the biggest lie, which was when he said the death of Osama bin Laden was a tragedy. That's what he said. He could have done that 30 years ago. The media would have reported it. Look, he's saying about that awful Corbyn who liked bin Laden. That would have been it. But instead, it's a big comedy thing. Everyone thinks it's hilarious and makes videos of him saying it. Look, that's what David Cameron said. That's as accurate as what he was claiming.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it
It
is.
doesn't mean it's perfect, and it doesn't mean, you know.
Yeah, but the question is how far down the road are we before print media becomes irrelevant?
Mm.
And we're
not there yet.
We're not there yet, definitely not.
The general election proved that.
The problem is TV is probably the most important for getting the message across because most people watch
most
TV.
people are watching TV and blindly watching TV.
But the problem is print media still sets the agenda for what the TV report.
Yeah.
And until that changes...
Yeah, you're still basically going to get Daily Mail on the TV.
Yeah, which is quite sad, really.
Did you watch the documentary about Britain First?
I
The
didn't know.
whitewash. It was a whitewash. The biased BBC bias. It was actually... They just filmed them for a bit. And they did pretty much what you'd expect, and that was it. So it's kind of, you know... But obviously what's interesting about Britain First, it's the first time you've had a far-right group being media literate, obviously, and what they did was very clever, in that they were on everybody's Facebook feed, well, not my Facebook feed, but you saw it coming, and it was sponsored, it was coming up. Britain First, pictures of kittens or anything, and then Britain First, Muslims, you know, and stuff like that. But it didn't have the effect. And really what that documentary was about, unintentionally actually, whether it was supposed to show up their racism or whatever it was supposed to do, what it actually showed was that social media is a bubble. And it doesn't necessarily have that huge effect. They had these big rallies, it was big in the media, it was Facebook. 100 people showed up. They claimed they had 1,000 people. If they included the 700 policemen and the 200 protesters. There was more protesters, there's much more policemen than the actual... But at the end, actually, a thing that surprised me after all their... Well, it seemed like they were trying to be media savvy and sound like normal people, but just gave up halfway through and said, "Rob, I'm not talking to you now, go away." And then at the very end, we saw the final march of these groups. There's probably 50 people at this march, and they all did the Heil Hitler salute. So, yeah, it's just the same again. It's just the same again. Can we talk about the Great British Bake Off?
Yeah. 14.5 million people watch the Great British Bake Off.
Yeah, there's a TV programme. If you don't know, it's as baffling to us as it sounds. Okay, but people do some cooking, and people watch the TV of the people doing the cooking, and then they watch people eat the food, and they tell them what it tastes like. You don't get to find out what it tastes like. They just have to tell them what it tastes like. So the most pointless programme in history. And the winner was a Muslim.
She had a headscarf and everything.
So, what? I don't understand. But I actually watched it. It was only a coincidence. I didn't know any of this. And my daughter asked to see it. So, okay, we'll watch it. It happened to be the final. And I was surprised that the standards were so low, actually. There's only one of them that was any good. The other two were pretty terrible. Well, you can't tell by the taste. But their presentation was dreadful. And there was one obvious winner who made this the final cake was just, you know. And the Daily Mail saying, well, it's bias, obviously. She shouldn't have won. This is the person who lost. They should have won, obviously, because they were white. Because a Muslim couldn't possibly win a cake competition.
Wow.
And you only have to watch it for 5 minutes to see.
There was actually two Muslims on there, wasn't there? I presume he was a Muslim. He was a junior doctor, I think, anaesthetist, and there was an incredibly
middle class
white geezer.
Yeah.
Quite pleasant chap actually.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So that sort of, and he was in the final. So
yeah, it's actually quite a positive story because I watched a few of them, and the one who won didn't do so well earlier on, and she sort of she's built over the period. So it's quite a good narrative. Mm. It just sort of fit quite well. But I would have thought the right wing press would have been quite happy because there's a big push on at the moment from the Conservatives to really solidify what they think Britain is. Mm. And to sort of force people to conform to what their idea of
trying
Britain
to
is.
define this British values business.
And the fact that there's a Muslim woman with a headscarf who got quite teary over the fact that she didn't have a traditional British wedding cake at her wedding, I thought they would have latched onto that and pushed that quite strongly.
I suppose the Tories
British values, yeah.
But the Daily Mail won't. That's a whole different thing, isn't it?
That's sort of the only thing I could pick up from the Great British Bake Off. Plus, cakes are nice.
Cakes are nice, yeah, and you don't get to eat them.
Yeah.
You can think, that looks nice, and I don't get it. What was the point in that? But yeah, I suppose the thing that occurred to me, the thing about it was, 2 minutes, I said 5, probably 2 minutes in, you could see who the winner was. Now, either the biased BBC bias are
they're editing it,
building the cakes for them, and they're all in on it. It's like the moon landing hoax, everybody was in on it, and has never said anything. Or she just baked better cakes.
Yeah.
Or she was better at the presentation, but they were lying about the taste. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm sure the person saying it believed it. That's the thing, isn't it? Is that when sometimes the Daily Mail will out and out lie, and they know it's not true, and they're bullshitting. But something like that, it's so ridiculous. They must believe it. They must have watched that programme and thought, biased BBC, let in the Muslim woman win.
Yeah.
And it made no sense, just from a few moments of the programme. How do you get into that mindset? How can you see things? Confirmation bias.
It's confirmation. I'm not so sure now. This Jeremy Corbyn thing, misquoting him deliberately, saying things that Boris Johnson has said and David Cameron has said in the past. They've taken a very short quote. Now it's been so widely covered that every journalist must know that this is an out of context quotation, and yet they keep repeating it.
Yeah.
Now, if they don't know it's an out of context quotation, that means they are not very good at their job and should be sacked, or they're lying.
Deliberately
and they're manipulating public opinion through lies, which
Ministry of Truth.
Which is very disconcerting, actually, to think that there are so many people out there that are willing to peddle this lie.
We know that, though, don't we? I mean, that's the media, isn't it? We know that. That's their job.
Yeah.
They are the Ministry of Truth, literally.
Yeah.
But when they do it they're doing it so badly.
Yeah.
And that it's so obvious that they're just idiots. They don't look like they're lying. They look like they're stupid. Ridiculous.
Now, David Cameron obviously went on the attack, made an incredibly personal attack at the Conservative Party conference on Jeremy Corbyn, and Jeremy Corbyn's response was, just shows that they're rattled.
Yeah. And lots of comments on the internet were like, they're not rattled by him, by Corbyn. Why did they do the whole thing attacking him then?
Yeah. What do you think Corbyn should do next?
I think it's absolutely crucial that he appears the same. The danger is if what the media can do is they can change their approach to him and say, look, he's as if it looks like he's become establishment.
Well, I mean, he's obviously very wise to that, because they're trying to lay traps for him left, right, and centre. So they're trying to say, oh, he'll never appoint McDonnell as Chancellor, but he did because he's consistent to his principles. Oh yeah, but is he going to kneel in front of the Queen at this Privy Council malarkey? Well, he's refused to do it. Well, he's not refused to do it. He's arranged it so he doesn't have to do it.
Yeah.
So he's managed to maintain his principles. So every time he maintains his principles, they have a go at how ridiculously out of order it is.
They retreat.
But as soon as he did comply and change what he said in the past, then...
Oh, he's a flip-flopper.
Yeah, he's a flip-flopper. There we go. He's cashing in. He's not different. It's all politics the same, as usual. So he seems to be quite wary of that trap. I think if he really wants to worry the Conservatives, I think he needs to... Well, the next thing is the Scottish elections. And then Labour needs to come out and say, okay, Labour's job at the moment is to save the Union. David Cameron has put the Union at peril with his incredibly ill-timed comments for a short political boost after the independence election. And it's up to Labour to save it. And realistically, only Labour can save it.
Yes.
They need to go out there and they need to win some seats back. Yeah, and if they do that, then the Union, it wouldn't look so likely that the Union's going to split, because at the moment it's a shoo-in.
Yeah.
The Union's going to end, and that is going to be David Cameron's legacy.
Yeah.
It's either going to be the Union splitting, or retreating from Europe, or both.
Yeah, it could be both.
Yeah.
It could be. And I suppose actually the Labour Scottish question is one of the biggest questions. Can Corbyn, who's a Londoner through and through, a middle class Londoner through and through, can he turn the tide? And it's very difficult to turn the tap back off. Once SNP is normal, you've got to get them to go back again. Even if it's what they're voting for, the leader they're voting for is so different. Even then, is it enough to persuade people to come back? And that's the question. It's such an unknown. The whole thing is such an unknown.
I think he can. I get the sense. The result of the referendum was quite clear, but there is also the sense that the Scottish have naturally seemed to be much more socially minded than traditional English Conservative voters. And I think Jeremy Corbyn can speak to those, and he can persuade them that his Labour is worth supporting. To stick it to the Conservatives. I don't think, although the SNP have had a massive surge, I don't know how realistically how strong that support is.
We don't know. It is a protest vote.
Yeah.
In that people were voting SNP specifically because they were protesting against Labour sending them up down the road.
Labour don't need a majority in order to save the Union. They just need to turn the tide.
Yeah.
And I think that's perfectly. And if he said, right, that's it, we're going to Scotland now and we're going to turn the tide, we're going to save the Union from David Cameron's short-sightedness. There are a lot of Tories who'd be incredibly unsettled by the thought of losing the Union, including David Cameron.
Well, exactly.
The idea of splitting up the Union is an anathema to Telegraph readers.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it would be in their interest if Corbyn directed his energies over there.
So all Corbyn's going, we're going to go save the Union, come and join us so we can save the Union. And I think, you would see a definite change in attitude. So I think that should be his focus, realistically.
Yeah, that will be the moral thing to do. So technically, if he is the person we think he is,
I don't think it's necessarily. I just think it's a smart thing to do, and it fits with his principles. It fits with the principles of the Labour Party. It fits with the principles and the feelings of the supporters who elected him. Also, the supporters and people who didn't elect him or nominate him. I mean, John McTernan was their centre when Labour got trounced in the election.
Yeah.
I mean, if Jeremy Corbyn made it his raison d'etre to go and turn that around, what could people like that say?
Yeah. And of course that will be typical and be typically so different. What really sets him apart in that he's doing it because it's the right thing to do. He's not doing it to win the election, which of course we haven't had anyone like that since the 80s. Not really. Maybe John Smith. I don't know.
These are interesting times.
So, well, anything else?
I don't think so. I think there's loads of. I mean, we
could
talk about
entertaining video. Isn't it?
Yeah, we could go on about how incredibly regressive the Tories have been. Their announcements have been Jeremy Hunt saying we need to be more like a third world country in order to motivate our workers.
Be like China, where they all commit suicide from overwork.
Yeah.
You plebs. And I'll sit in my ivory tower and pretend that they're all in their ivory towers.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we will report once again from our ivory tower.
Yeah.
With the lizards and all that stuff, Illuminati.
Etc. Champagne socialists, politics of envy, blah blah blah.